No man is more professional than I. I am a 1% man. I am not above or below any man. I'm training my mind. I'm building my body. I'm connecting to my soul. I'm investing my money. Welcome to the 1% Man Podcast. Let's go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the 1% Man Podcast. I got my good friend here with me, Lewis from Team Swartz on YouTube. Sir, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast. I'm pretty excited and sharing some wealth and knowledge, hopefully, that will help some people.
Yes. No, I think this is definitely a needed topic. There's a lot of misconceptions about the military, a lot of things that we need to get straight here. We won't cover all of it, but we're going to cover a good portion of it, which is going to be great for everybody. Now, just to know a little bit about, so Sergeant First Class Swartz is a drill sergeant, which is probably the most feared person ever in the in the world of military, right? So if you ever see those videos of shark attacks or people yelling, like 9 times out of 10, that's him and his good battle buddies going around attacking people. But he's been serving New York City for over 20 years, which is amazing. 20 years of serving his country and his city, which, thank you for your service as well. I think that's amazing. Like I told you before, I think that's just phenomenal. But now, before we dive into today's topic, I want to ask you 3 questions so we get to know you better. Is that cool?
Yeah, go ahead. Shoot.
Cool. So question number 1, knowing everything you know right now, what's one piece of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
That's a tough question because there's a few things that I would say. But if I had to narrow it down to one, get a mentor sooner.
Ooh.
So you can make better decisions, not only throughout your career, but throughout your life.
I definitely like that. I've invested into mentors and I have seeked mentors, and because of a mentor now, and he's in the military as well, he actually helped me to start on the journey of paying off all my debt and becoming consumer debt free. Like if I never had that conversation with him, I would still be like all of society, just racking up debt, not even worried about it. But I'm like, in the next 2 months, I'm 10,000 right now, but in the next 2 months I should be debt free. So yes, I totally agree with that. Question number 2. If you had to be an expert in another space besides content creation, army, the military, recruiting, being a drill sergeant, YouTube, what would it be and why? Especially with the background that you have, I feel like you almost live the best life of anyone could live. But what would it be if you had to choose for yourself something else? What would it be and why?
That's a really good question. Originally, growing up, I wanted to be in law enforcement, and unfortunately, I am red-green colorblind, which is a requirement to have normal color vision when enforcing the law in the capacity as a law enforcement officer. So my dreams were crushed when going through the military entrance processing to become a soldier in the United States Army. And yeah, so my dreams were pretty much crushed at that time. Honestly, when I was a high school student, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with life. And ultimately, until recently, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But with my content creation led me to pursuing a degree in communications and media. And to be honest with you, I don't see myself doing anything else, at least at this time. And if I were to change anything from the past, as far as like choosing a different path, I kind of feel like there's a lot of people like me living life aimlessly or don't really know what their skill sets are or what they could do. But if I could go back in time and choose a different career path, and something that I thoroughly enjoy, it would be maybe to become an instructor for scuba diving and maybe open up my own school, maybe go down the Caribbean, and do stuff like that, maybe content creation around that. But yeah, I enjoy scuba diving. I don't do it as often as I'd like. I am certified, obviously. But it's a lot of fun. And that's probably what I would do. I would double down on that because that's another passion of mine.
Okay. So a man of many passions and many fields, which I think is amazing. And I want to come back and touch on what you just said too as well, once we answer this one more question. So question number 3, what is one value you believe all men should learn and adopt to make it a better place for everyone?
It's a toss up between, in my opinion, empathy and integrity, right? So many people walk around like their crap don't stink and they think that they're better than everyone else, and they don't empathize for the other person's feelings. Like, you don't have to agree with them or sympathize and actually feel for them, but to understand where they are coming from so that you can make a better, well-informed decision on how to handle any particular situation that you find yourself in. So as a leader, in any capacity, empathy, I think, is extremely important when leading your soldiers and letting them know that you do genuinely care for their well-being and their thoughts, whether or not you execute how they feel about certain things or whatnot. But if they know that you know, have the empathy to understand them and to make better decisions for the betterment of not only your people, but for the organization that you're in.
I 100% agree with you. Being a writer for Entrepreneur now, I see that a lot of my writing I take from the military from a leadership standpoint about caring about your people, taking them in and making sure, you know, as an NCO, you know, if something happens to one of your soldiers, it doesn't matter what time of day, when it is, everything else drops and you go take care of that person, and you make sure that whatever they need is taken care of, and before it gets anywhere else, you know. So yeah, you're that first line. So I love what you just said. And it's something and going into today's topic, we're going to be talking about the military and why it's a viable option in today's world and economy to join the military and still join, because there's still a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of misconceptions and misguided talks about the military and what we do and what we don't do. So something that you touched on was that a lot of men nowadays don't know what they want to do. They don't know their skill sets. They don't know what really fascinates them about life, whether they come out of high school or whether they're about to hit 30 and have a midlife crisis, right? Or whether they're looking on Instagram and they're seeing everybody else making millions of dollars and they're like, oh, well, I'm not doing all that, right? But why is the military still such a great option for men nowadays?
I think that joining the military brings a lot to the table, right? So you have different walks of life, different cultures, different age groups, all that good stuff, and different experiences. And more so for the younger generation, I feel that this would be at the very minimum, a great stepping stone into introducing to you life and getting to know yourself while learning valuable skill sets, possibly certifications and such that you could use in the real world, right? So if you join the military, like I'm actually a full-time recruiter and a part-time drill sergeant, and I've been recruiting for over 16 years. And as a recruiter, I don't push for combat arms MOSs because outside of leadership and having fun, being in a combat arms position doesn't really add value to your life when you decide to leave the military. Maybe as a stepping stone, just to get it out of your system, to have fun and all that stuff, maybe go combat arms. But I always suggest to applicants to choose something that they can use in the real world. And if they're a younger person coming out of high school, preferably in a field of where they think or feel that they're going to study in school, if it involves college or a trade school, so on and so forth, to add that additional experience and training to the resume, thus making them more competitive when competing or interviewing for a potential position outside of the military.
No, totally agreed. I love how you broke that down. I said something that even myself, I did because I studied petroleum engineering. I chose to become a 92 Fox, which is a fueler, because that was going to prepare me when I come on the outside to have those conversations. And to when I got into class, the things that I learned in the military, I was learning in class. And I was like, oh, this is easy, until we got into thermodynamics and, you know, calculus and all that. And I was like, well, this is a little different, but I check the deuces to that. But besides that, yes, especially. But could you talk to us about your story? How did you join the military, and what made you decide to serve your country?
So for me, since I was a little boy, I knew that I was going to serve the military in some form or fashion. Now, like many, I was hesitant on taking the plunge and going full-time active duty. But let me backpedal a little bit. So as a high school student, I was a volunteer fireman for my local town, upstate New York. I just thoroughly enjoyed helping out my community in times of need by putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff. Like, I just live, breathe, and ate crap, all kinds of firefighting stuff. And I just loved helping people, right? Being that role model and just being there for people. So at that time, in my late June junior, early senior year, I started researching the military. And back then, Google was like a year or two old. So it really is nothing like it is today. So there wasn't a whole lot of information out there. And like, unless you heard a specific ad about the National Guard, you didn't know anything about the National Guard. So I initially was checking out the active Army and the active Marine Corps. Active meaning full-time in those branches. Yeah, no worries. As a recruiter, you kind of have to break things down Barney style. So with that being said, at that time, recruiting was extremely toxic, and recruiters would blatantly lie to you because obviously we were at the heart of the war at that time, right? Actually, no, not yet. Actually, that was pre 9/11. So, but the culture then was they would tell you whatever you want to hear just so that you would be able to join, like promising people four-wheelers, so on and so forth. Anyway, I felt like a number or a piece of meat, not as a recruiter trying to look out for my best interest, break things down, explain things, and make me feel like I'm making a good decision. They were just rushing to get me across that finish line to raise my hand and serve my country. To me, that was a huge turnoff. I knew I was going to join. Like, you sold me. Like, just answer my questions and share what I need to know so I can make a well-informed decision. Went to a couple of different recruiting stations. And like I said, that really turned me off. And eventually I ran into a National Guard recruiter who was very laid back, just simply gave me his card. And, I checked out the website real quick. And for some reason, like I met him on a Tuesday night. No, I'm sorry, Monday night. And I called him at like almost 11 o'clock at night, answered his phone, answered a couple of brief questions. That Tuesday after school, sat down with him, 100%, laid everything on the table, was honest and forthright. Didn't feel like he was holding anything over my head or promising me anything I couldn't get. Anyway, long story short, that evening, I took the ASVAB test, which was a paper version. And that Friday, I took the medical exam, failed the color test, and couldn't get the job of choice, but I ended up choosing 71 Lima, which was at that time administrative assistant, which is equivalent to the 42 Alpha human resources specialist position today. So that's what I ultimately enlisted as. So I chose the Army National Guard because of my community aspect of my background. And that's what the National Guard is great for. You can still serve and do things for your country overseas in dealings with humanitarian missions, peacekeeping missions, and obviously combat. What makes the Army National Guard different and unique is our additional responsibility to our individual states and communities. And that was my selling point. And my original intent was to start part-time in the National Guard, get a taste of what the military was like. If I had liked it, then I would move on to active duty. So eventually, long story short, had an issue with my girlfriend at the time, caught her cheating. So I wanted to go active duty at that point. I was like, you know what, let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's go full hool. My full-timer at the time was like, you know what, we got this Homeland Security mission down in New York City. Why don't you do that before you make any hasty decisions on going active duty? Long story short, that's ultimately what I did. Did that for 2.5 years. And from there, I became a recruiter. I've been recruiting for over 16 years since, and I haven't looked back.
Oh, I love that. But could you explain to us the different branches within the military? Because there's the active component, then there's the Army Reserves, right? There's a reserve component, reserves all across the board, and then there's the National Guard. Could you break down the three? Because I think most people don't know that there's three branches within the branches. So
Absolutely. So if I understand your question correctly, maybe I'll over-explain just to cover all the bases.
Yes,
but there
please.
are at least three components of the Army. As you described, right? You have the active duty, which is considered full-time. Then you have both the Army Reserve and the Army National Guard, which is part-time. Part-time meaning that you're agreeing to work a minimum of 1 weekend per month and 2 weeks out of the year. All three of us, to include the rest of the military, we all work full-time or part-time in the event that our country needs to go overseas to handle whatever types of missions are obligated at that time. So every branch of the military has an active duty full-time component and a reserve component, which is part-time. Part-time is geared towards people who are financially stable or maybe living at home with mom and pop and they don't want to, take that plunge and go full-time. So with it being part-time, it allows and affords people who are either entrepreneurs or maybe they found themselves in a career or a business that they belong to that they're happy with that, because I wouldn't tell anyone that you're going to get rich by being in the military, but it's definitely going to have its perks and its benefits, right? So part-time is for those who are financially stable and they still have that desire to serve in the military, but don't want that full-time commitment. Because when you, as you know, are active duty, that's pretty much for the most part all you can do, with the exception of what you could do maybe within your barracks or your like dorm room, so to speak, like kind of what you're doing here with your podcast on the side, which is your side hustle, right? So you have limitations when you are active duty, whereas you have less limitations when you are part-time. So it really depends on what your needs, wants, and desires are and what you feel is a better fit for yourself.
No, exactly. So I love that you said that it's for people that part-time, especially with the reserves component or the National Guard component. Those are the people that really are financially stable and they believe like, hey, I still want to serve, but I don't want to give up what I have going on full time. So those people that already have a career and all that. Now, will their jobs work with them if they do want to serve and if they have to leave for training? How does that work? If I do have a full-time job, I have a family, how does that all work?
So being in the reserve or National Guard is actually, in my opinion, more challenging than being active duty, in the sense that your military duty, even though it's part-time, has precedence over anything else that you do. So you're going to be missing possible birthdays, family gatherings, special events, unless you get pre-approval from your commander to miss that day or weekend or annual training because of that pre-scheduled event that you have, right? So you have to work around your military career. Now, when it comes to civilian employers, you are protected by federal law. So with that being said, they have to abide by it. Most issues arise with small mom and pop shops where they have like a handful of employees, nothing special, and they don't have like an HR department that are understanding and know the law, right? So explaining to them certain things, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So esgr.mil, MIL, is a phenomenal website that breaks down the employers and the employees' rights. And essentially, your career in the military comes first. So if you typically work on the weekends, they have to understand that for that weekend, they have to afford you that time off to be able to execute your military responsibility. If they fail to do so, they could face fines and or punishment through civil court and all that good stuff. And you could possibly sue them if you could prove that you know they're not doing exactly what they're supposed to do by law. So it's, like I said, it's more of an issue for the small and pop shops, but for the bigger corporations that have an HR department, they already know the law. And the key is to document everything digitally, right? So your immediate supervisor might not know the law, but the HR department will. So that's why it's very important that you email everything so you have a digital footprint and you abide by the rules or guidance through the esgr.mil website of what you should be doing, when you should submit your orders, so on and so forth. But when you are part-time, you have your drill schedule for the whole year. So I would give that to your supervisor and the HR department, and they can coordinate things around your military schedule. That is the best practice. And in most companies would like a memorandum from your units or your company that you belong to confirm like a receipt that you in fact did perform your military duties. And that's like, I guess like an insurance for some companies to make sure that you're doing the right thing and you're not just requesting unauthorized time off, if that makes sense.
Yep. True. So something we hear a lot about is military benefits, right? So one of the, I guess the top three military benefits are healthcare, school, and what would you say would be the top three military benefits, and why should people care about them?
Well, I mean, there's quite a few of them. I'm going to loop in the medical with the dental. So as a full-time soldier in the United States Army or in the military, obviously, as you know, is 100% free. So that's amazing. So although our annual income is generally lower than, say, the civilian counterpart, but you're saving money on rent, medical, dental, vision, which I don't know if you know, but like as a civilian, when I took a 4-month break from my Homeland Security mission down here in the city with the National Guard, I went back to my civilian company. I went back to being part-time. I was paying into health insurance. And as a young, healthy 19-year-old, I was paying out of my pocket about $200 a month. And my employer was paying the other half. And that's just for a single person who is healthy and young with no issues. Now, if you obviously you could,
That's crazy.
yes, it's insane. Whereas
Yeah.
as a part-time soldier, at least in the Army Reserve or Army National Guard, you could pay into the TRICARE Reserve Select program, where as an individual, it's $48 to $50 a month, right? I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but it's less than $50 a month.
Exactly.
Whereas a family, I think the maximum they'll charge you for is up to 5 dependents, capping out at like $240 to $250, and that's for family coverage.
Yeah, the whole family's covered.
Exactly. And you could have 20 kids and it would not cost you anything more than $240 to $250 a month for family coverage. The dental program as an individual is right around $12 to $14 and $32.95 for family coverage. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who leave even active duty or even as a regular civilian end up joining the military to save on that, because that's a huge benefit to spend less for health and dental and eventually vision, because they're going to be rolling out with the program soon. That's going to be comparable to the dental amount. Yeah. So that's going to be amazing. But like that in of itself saves families a lot of money, especially now where they've made it in law where you would get penalized in your taxes for not having that coverage. So this is an alternate way of getting those benefits and not spending a lot of money out of pocket. Now, the other biggest thing that a lot of younger folks will end up joining the military is the education benefits. So active duty, well, not getting too in depth, but active duty obviously offers more through the GI Bill, right? The 9/11 GI Bill, which pays a crap ton more. But for the most part, if you're only doing it for 3 years, so you can leverage that program when you leave active duty, that's going to pay a lot more. However, if you are a guard or reservist, you can focus college on full-time with assistance, not as much of the reserve compared to the guard, which I'll get to in a second. So if you're active duty full-time in the Army, you could do 1 to 3 courses online, which is part-time. If in a lot of cases, your commander has to approve it. Unless it's online, then you don't really need to. But depending on what your unit is doing, it makes it very difficult to knock out college courses while you're full-time in the military, because your job in the Army comes first. Everything else is secondary. When you're a reservist or in the guard is obviously first, meaning that you have to make sure that your 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year is free to conduct your military responsibilities. But the other 20 days out of the month is up to you, whether you want to go to school full-time or part-time, and there, and what you see from there. But like when it comes to guard and reserve, the federal tuition is the same, which is $4,000 or 16 college credits, whichever one comes first, which, as you know, at least here in New York City, won't even cover 1 semester at a community college. The benefit of being in the guard is that we have state tuition assistance that could pay up to 100% of your tuition fees. For example, in the New York Army National Guard, we will pay 100% up to your first 4-year degree in any community or state college or university. So you can literally go to like SUNY Albany, SUNY Buffalo, and we'll pay 100% of your tuition fees and won't even need to tap into your federal tuition. And both Guard and Reserve and all other reserves in the military offer the same Select Reserve Montgomery GI Bill, which will pay out up to $394 per month for every month that you're in college full time, which is 12 or more credits, for a maximum of 36 payments, which is equivalent to a 4-year degree. So that will also help offset your costs with whatever you want to use that money for. The tuition goes to the school. The GI Bill money goes directly to you, direct deposit into your bank account so that you can use and leverage it how you see fit.
Yeah. And usually 9 times out of 10, most people I know are using those, they always get financial aid. So there's always a nice little kickback, hopefully.
Yes,
which is
100%.
Those refunds are always nice to see come into your account. You're just like, oh, this is a very nice check. I want more of this. So it's always been great. So before we get into the misconceptions, I want to ask you, what has been your biggest benefit that you've seen personally for yourself with being in the military for this 20-year span now?
So
give me like your top three. That way.
What was the question again?
Give me like your top 3 benefits for being in the military for the past 20 years.
So for me, the top 3 benefits would have to be as a recruiter, it's not rigid where it's a 9 to 5 job where it has its pros and cons of having that. With recruiting, it's 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days. We're always recruiting no matter what, because the wheel never finishes. Like, so if you do a deployment, when that deployment is over, all that stress and everything goes out the window. It's like, weight off my shoulders, good to go. But as a recruiter, it's like a Ferris wheel, just keeps going. So we don't typically work a 9 to 5 job, although that's kind of like our expectation, but we could be working as early as 4 o'clock in the morning or as late as midnight. And it could, like I said, 6 to 7 days a week, depending on what you put into it and what is mandated by your command, depending on how successful you are in your career as a recruiter. With that being said, with me being a successful recruiter, it's more beneficial to me because I, for the most part, make up my schedule, go in when I want, leave when I want, work weekends if I feel like it or not, outside of the recruit sustainment program, drill weekends with the new recruits, preparing them for basic training. But the flexibility of working my schedule. So I don't, it's more flexible in that way. Second, with a high school diploma, without having earning my degree yet, at this point, with 20 years of service, me being in New York City, when being in the military and a reserve component on active duty, and sometimes on active duty, if you have a family and you're living off post, you get housing allowance, which is not taxed. New York City has one of the highest cost of living expenses. So our housing allowance is typically higher than the rest of the nation. So with that being said, between my housing allowance, my base pay, bonus cola, and all that good stuff, right? You know what I'm talking about. But anyway, my high school guidance counselor thought I was freaking nuts for joining the military. And all I do is help facilitate information so that people can make a well-informed decision on whether they want to join the military or not. And as a result, me living in New York City as a recruiter, between all the different pays that factor into it, I'm making over $120,000 with a high school diploma. For me, that's a huge benefit, because if I had stayed in my hometown, never joined the military, and didn't get the mentor or mentors that I've had over the years, I wouldn't be making what I am now. Now, don't get me wrong, money's not that important. I mean, it's right up there next to oxygen, but never do anything solely for money. But with that also being said, how many people do you know that has a high school diploma that's making over 6 figures? Think about it. Now, I'm grateful for what I have and what I've done. And like you said, maybe we could make different decisions growing up throughout our life. But that is huge to me, that it boggles my mind. Like when people look down on people who join the military, because a lot of people think of the military as like a last resort, you have nothing else going on, so on and so forth. But this has also led me into a lot of different skill sets that I can leverage as a civilian when I do leave the military, right? So for me, he who laughs first will laugh last. And if you come in here with an open mind and you have good work ethic, positive attitude, and willing to grow, learn, and like you love to preach on your blogs and everything, improving yourself by 1% daily, always seeking to better yourself and your family, is how you're going to reach your pinnacle, your success. And even then, there's always room for improvement. Like a friend asked me growing up throughout the ranks as a recruiter, he's like, what's the biggest room in the world? I'm like, I don't know. The White House? What kind of question is that? And he goes, the biggest room in life is improvement. You can always improve on anything that you have going on. And when you do fail or you make a mistake, think of it as an experiment. It's not the end all be all. You got to tweak it, fix the controls or fix the variable in the situation that you're in, and look at and analyze how you can do things better. And that's my tips and advice to that.
I love that. I love that. And I was going to say, my biggest thing is that I've got an ability to jump, like to get over fears. Like I jump out of airplanes, so airborne, which is great, exciting, right? Super scary. I mean, I pissed myself the first time jumping out, but I mean, in a 2-week span, I was able to learn how to jump out of an airplane by myself. And I think the mindset shift for that was like, once I did that, I was like, what can I not do? Right. So now, even myself, I'm looking at going to drill sergeant school myself, and I'm like, oh wow, I can do that. And taking.
I can definitely help you out with that.
You said what?
I said I could definitely help you out with that.
Okay, perfect. But you see, even then again, like I have so many people that have been where I want to go that I'm able to reach out to somebody else and be like, oh, hey, can you help me? because you see them, like we're both in the military now. I have that network, and you have that instant connection with a lot of people where you can be like, "Oh, were you from?" I met a guy yesterday at Enterprise. He was former military. We had a conversation because why? We share that bond, which is
100%.
bar none is always the best thing in the world. So I want to move a little bit more into misconceptions and something even for myself, being African American, joining the military. My family was so scared. I think you probably get this a lot. They always think that the military is going to take all its soldiers, put them on the front line, and we're all gonna get shot and we're all gonna die, right? And our family gets so scared that, oh, they got guns over there, like, or all these crazy things that's happening over there. Could you kind of walk us through and explain to us the truth behind what happens when you go in to pick a job, and like that misconception of like the army is gonna put everybody in the front lines? Could you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, so there are quite a few misconceptions, with the biggest ones being that you're going to be sent off to war right away, that you're going to die, and that everything is combat related. Well, although, yes, the uniform that we typically wear represents war, right? That's the uniform that we wear, right? You're not joining the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts. So yes, inherently in any position that you get into, there are risks involved. The ones that make me laugh the most is when Johnny Snotnose is looking to become a civilian law enforcement officer and looking to join the military. Mommy's like, I don't want him to die, blah, blah, blah. All right. So what you're saying is you're okay with him being at risk to being beat up, shot, stabbed for the next 20 years of his civilian career as a law enforcement agency versus 1 year if and when he's deployed overseas. Got it. Awesome. It's all about perspective, right? So obviously we have inherited risks involved by joining the military. And yes, there are two types of positions in the military: combat arms and combat support. And even the ones of combat arms, the ones that did go to war, maybe 1% of them actually saw combat, right? Like full-fledged combat. Less than 10%. We'll increase a little bit, right? So with that being said, yes, you can be deployed overseas, but everyone is trained as a soldier first. Don't get it twisted. People forget that all the time. You're a soldier first, and then whatever year it is that your job skill that you sign up for. But if you're smarter, you will choose an MOS, or military occupation specialty, aka job skill, that you can use in real world. And that's what you would do typically when you're overseas. Now, you will obviously have your rifle or weapon of choice or whatever is issued to you for protection, right? If you're combat support, but you'll be doing your job. So for example, I'm a human resources specialist. I am an engineer. I operate heavy construction equipment, right? And I'm also a recruiter and a retention NCO. So one of those three things I'll be doing overseas: either pushing paperwork, probably at best, maybe get a paper cut; construction, where I operate heavy machinery like cranes, bulldozers, Hi-X's, all that good stuff, right? Which is a lot of fun. And as a recruiting retention NCO, instead of me looking for new people to join as a retention NCO, my secondary job is to retain the good soldiers that want to stay in to help stay in. And if I were to go deployed overseas, that's exactly what I do. Now, if we live life on what if, on strictly the negative narrative, we don't know where we're going to go until we're there, right? So if you live in the negative narrative, you could say that with anything that you do, in any decision that you make in life. Well, I don't want to do this because I'm afraid this is going to happen, or I'm going to fail. Or in this case, in some of the parents' mentality is that their son or daughter is going to be sent off to war, which is obviously a possibility, but they're going to die. What they don't understand is that you get a lot of training, or at least for the Guard and Reserve, you go through a whole year's worth of additional training, extensive training outside of your normal Joe weekends to prepare for a deployment. It's not like we call you up and be like, yo, come down to the armory, pack up your stuff, we're leaving out tomorrow, right? It's not like that. There's a whole process that gets involved, and the unit actually has to achieve a certain percentage of successes in the various training throughout the year. And if they fail, then they're going to be cut off that deployment because they're obviously not ready for what's to come. So you're going to be trained. You're going to have good soldiers to your left and right, and hopefully good leaders above you. Yeah. But you have a greater chance of being injured than you do dying overseas, right? So think about it. Look in your local area. I live in New York City. If I just do a 10-mile radius in New York City, just auto accident deaths are going to supersede every death count that we have in the military of all branches combined in just 1 year in that 10-mile radius here in New York City. So you have, like I said, you have a greater chance of getting injured than you do overseas than you do dying. That's the other statistic. Like, you're telling me that you're okay with driving a couple tons of metal to transport from point A to point B, but you don't want to take the risk of being a member in the military and gaining additional skill sets, experience, and training and stuff that will make you not only a better person, but hopefully more effective throughout life later on, because there's a lot of things that outside of the monetary gains that you will get through the military, right? But that's pretty much how I feel about it. So it's the dying in combat, being sent to war, and not being able to focus on your life. Yes, if you go active duty, some things will be placed on hold or on pause because it's not conducive to your work environment. But as a reservist or a guard member, you focus on your life 100% full time, and you're doing this part time, and there's nothing restricting you from achieving your goals. So if you have, like I said before, good work ethic, and in this case, if you are a go-getter like yourself, being an entrepreneur, good time management skills, then you can achieve anything that you want, that you put yourself out to.
I 100% agree. I've been afforded so many opportunities being in the military, and I had to talk to. Once I got through basic and I got through EIT and I came back home, started working. Something I just thought about. I was like, I would rather be around people that are highly trained than to be than to be walking around here with I don't know who's trained, I don't know who's not trained, I don't know who's for me, who's against me. But when I wear the green suit, I'm around people that I know I can trust. Right. We may not have the best relationships, but I know, like, okay, you know what? The person to my left and right, like, they want me to go home and I want them to go home at the end of the day. So I'd rather be around that and around that environment than to be in around an environment where you're just like, you're a regular civilian. And something that I think is funny, we should definitely touch on this. You said that it's harder to be in the reserves than it is in active duty, which I completely agree with you, which I feel like everyone's going to shit on that just because it's just because there's always that battle between the two. But what type of mindset does somebody need to have when they want to join? Right. Because I know a lot of people will come in maybe cocky or whatever, but what's the prime mindset to have when you do join the military? What should you prepare yourself for?
So this is kind of like it's kind of difficult to pinpoint just like one way of responding to this. I'm going to say it to this way. If you're coming in as an older person who, maybe executed a few things in life, maybe failed, and their mindset is, this is my last resort, I have nothing else going on, let me join the military. And let's say you're in the upper 20s to mid 30s joining the military, and your drill sergeant, for example, is someone who's like a sergeant E5, or maybe even a staff sergeant who's like in their early 20s. The mindset of, well, I'm older than you, why the hell are you yelling at me like this? Like, be humble, right? And come in here willing to grow. And this is for anyone who's joining the military. The mindset you should have is, my glass is half full. I don't know everything. And even if you do know a lot, you can still learn from everybody. And whether it's a private or a commissioned officer who's a lieutenant or higher, it doesn't matter. And anywhere in between, it doesn't matter what rank you hold or what experiences you have, unless you can constructively bring it to the table. So the mindset I would have is to, again, have your glass half full, be willing to grow, have a good positive attitude, good work ethic, and always look for ways to not only better yourself, but the organization of itself. Everything is a learning experience. You're going to have good leaders above you, and you're going to have some leaders above you where you just want to punch in the throat. And even then, in that situation, that in of itself is still going to be a learning experience. So you have two choices when you eventually get to that position where you are now the leader and in charge of others. Now, are you going to fall into that same toxic environment where, well, if they did it, then I can do it too, or because you're lazy and you don't want to break the mold, right? So you take the good things of leaders above you and you remember that, so that when you get into that position, you emulate it, and you want to also remember where you came from and the experiences that you had, so that when you had a leader above you doing XYZ that is not conducive to a teamwork or in leadership in general, or things that were perceived as toxic, remember not to make the same mistake and make the organization better, because it starts with you, right? And the higher that you go up in the rank, the more influence that you will have to make change. So if you don't like where you're at now, and is like I said, as long as you work hard every single day to get there, when you get to that level, start influencing. So your influence is going to be smaller in the beginning, and you don't necessarily have to be a leader either to influence. So like when you are in that position, make those changes and impact others, and try to make people better. And as long as you take care of your troops, the better they'll take care of you, and you'll go way further in life.
Perfect. No, I love that. I think that was a great response. Now, if someone is looking to join, what is the fastest and quickest way for them to go join?
Contact your recruiter. I actually did a video on this not too long ago, but first do some research first and write down every single question or concern that you might have, like mom and dad being concerned about you being deployed, not being able to focus on college, maybe even dying, so on and so forth, so that when you sit down with a recruiter, they can respond appropriately and you're organized and get everything up front, right? So you're going to check out the official websites first, talk to military folks who are previously served or currently serving now to get their insight, and then sit down with the recruiter. Then when you have all your list of questions, you're not forgetting anything, because if you're like me, you have a bald moment or equivalent to a blonde moment and forget all your questions and then have to, call back up later on. But get everything addressed in that first initial meeting. Maybe do some more additional research on your own through like Reddit, other resources, to include the official websites so that you can make a well-informed decision. But my biggest thing for you is don't join or go to a particular career field just because I, as your recruiter, is telling you that that's where you should go. So I want you to join and to do things for you, for your reasons and your reasons alone. And that's all that matters, because at the end of the day, it's your career. This is more prevalent, in my opinion, for active duty, because that's exactly what you'll be doing every single day, 365, outside of your approved leave days. When you're part-time, the MOS or job really isn't too important, because you're not really doing your job on that 1 week in a month. It's more typically for your 2 to 3 weeks during your annual training where you'll legitimately be doing your job. Being Guard and Reserve is more or less for the benefits and the perks of being a service member while serving, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely does make sense. So, and where can people find more about you and the content that you're creating?
So my two primary platforms that I create content for is on Instagram and YouTube, with YouTube being my primary platform for posting informative, hopefully somewhat entertaining and energetic videos on Army basic training, how to survive it, what to expect, updates, changes, so on and so forth. And I do post some recruiting related topics, like if you're joining at an older age, what are the requirements, what's MEPS like, different types of contracts, bonuses, so on and so forth. So yeah, anything that deals with the initial entry training and the joining process is primarily what my platforms are all about. And eventually I'll be doing things on leadership, unit, guard life, so on and so forth. So hopefully it'll be more of a well-rounded platform in the future. But right now it's typically basic training and joining the Army Reserve, or Army National Guard.
Perfect. Love it. And last part, this is where we give the person being interviewed, want to give you a moment to share your last words. So this is something that before we go, you want to share an affirmation, a mantra, something you've learned, whatever it is that you want to have us carry with us before we tune out and go into the world. What is that?
So I want to leave you with this. And whether you decide to join the military or not, if you have an inkling, a thought, an idea that you have any type of inspiration to become a soldier or a military service member, there's a phrase out there: it's never too late, but it's never too late until it's too late. And as a recruiter of 16 plus years, I run into people that are late in the 30s, into their 40s, sometimes even 50s, of people who finally mustered up enough courage to walk into our recruiting office or to call me up saying, hey, listen, when I was 17 to 21 or something like that, my mom and dad, they didn't want me joining, but I'm ready to make this decision. I want to commit to this. I want to join. And now it's too late because they've exceeded the age limit, which is the age cutoff is 35. So if you feel that this is something you want to do, don't. And this is also outside of the military, and this goes for anything in life. Unless somebody is putting money in your pocket, a roof over your head, food in your stomach, taking care of your bills, listen to what they have to say, respectfully acknowledge them, take it into an account, maybe factor it into your decision-making process. But at the end of the day, whatever you choose, do it for your reasons and your reasons alone, no matter what it is that you're doing in life, whether it's joining the military, going to school, changing your career. Let's say you're in law enforcement, but you hate your life, but you've always wanted to do something else or thought about doing something else. Take the plunge, do your research and execute. Do not follow somebody else's dreams so they can vicariously live through you or whatever their opinions are. Opinions are like assholes, and everyone seems to have one. So you do you, boo-boo. Do what you feel is best for you. Because at the end of the day, if you live your life for somebody else based on their reasons, it's going to create resentment and possibly unhappiness. I'd rather you choose something and be happy about it for your reasons versus doing it for somebody else's for their happiness and not necessarily yours, and then thus being miserable. So follow your heart, follow your dreams, create a business or something around whatever your desires are. But like I said, do you, boo-boo, because nobody else cares about what's going on in your life. And it's funny because a lot of people know exactly what to do with your life, but they're not doing jack shit about theirs. Pardon my French.
No, I totally agree. And usually the last word I don't say anything, but I just had to say something. I totally agree with you. Everyone always can tell you like, oh no, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But especially when it comes to the military or joining armed forces or even your career, everyone can tell you, oh no, go do this, go do that. You're gonna make a lot of money. But yet you always see that they never are actually doing whatever they're telling you should go do. And you're just like, why aren't you doing it? And there's never a good answer. There's always an excuse behind it. So I totally agree. And my brother, Lewis, thank you so much for coming on. And my brother, you heard it here first. Your legacy starts today. Thank you, my friend, for tuning into today's episode. This means so much to us over here at the 1% Man community. Now, we want to extend a hand of gratitude to you. So I have a free gift for you. All you have to do is go to www.the1percentman.com/podcast gift. This is an exclusive gift for listeners that tune into our podcast. So go over there, get that free gift as well. And now I have two simple acts of you. One, hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment and a 5-star review, because that helps us to see what you love about the podcast, and that helps us to bolster up in the rankings so more people can find us and listen to this pertinent information that we have for men of today's age. Last but not least, I want you to go back and listen to this podcast. Find just one thing that you can implement in your life today so you can move forward. Remember, progress over perfection. And till next time, my friend, your legacy starts today.